At the studio, we have Shamsul Alam Pantho, SATV's international affairs commentator, and John Charles Dalton, international consultant. And from Washington, D.C., we have Norman Floyd Barnes, SATV's geopolitical correspondent based in USA. Let me begin from Shamsul Alam Pantho because he has latest update. What's going on around the world? What's happening? What's the update, sir?
Thank you so much, Mr. Kanchan. I want to welcome Mr. John Charles Dalton in the studio, and of course Norman Floyd Barnes, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin our discussion today by saying that due to staff shortages at U.S. air traffic control centers, coupled with Federal Aviation Administration mandating 4% flight reduction at 40 major airports, this has led to almost 2,000 flight cancellations or just over Friday and Saturday in the weekend. And alongside, we have Gaza's health ministry confirming that it had received remains of 15 Palestinians released by Israel via the International Committee of the Red Cross under a ceasefire agreement. And of course, the Trump administration has announced 2 agreements in which it will expand medical coverage and lower the monthly cost of popular obesity drug to as little as USD 150.
Very well described, sir. Let me connect to Washington, D.C. Norman Floyd Barnes is there. Good morning, sir. And let us know what's happening in United States, in domestic politics, Congress, and also in Senate. And Mamdani is still leading the news updates. Let us know what's happening. What are you going to share with us in the beginning of the show? Norman Floyd Barnes from Washington, D.C.
Good morning from Washington. Today we are entering Sunday, the 40th day of the shutdown. The Senate been working this weekend. The Democrats proposed a offer. This offer entailed extending the Affordable Care Act for another year. This offer was immediately rejected by the Republicans. So we are back to where we're going again, is still at a stalemate. As my colleague mentioned, the U.S. Airlines has canceled more than 2,500 flights over the weekend, which is about over 4% of the have SNAP, which is the what we call the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The Supreme Court overruled Friday. They came back Friday at the request of the Trump administration to basically have an emergency appeal to block the lower court's original ruling to supply the people with the SNAP subsidies. The court ruled Friday, this is the Supreme Court, that the United States do not have the money, so they do not have to pay. So we go into a situation where 1 in 8 Americans rely on the supplemental assistance program. They do not have funds. However, the Trump administration was able to find money to pay the U.S. troops, the U.S. Customs, the Customs program, the Border Patrol, Coast Guard, and the FBI. So they was able to find money for them, but the rest of Americans are what we call preparing for starvation.
Very much appreciated, Norman. Very much appreciated. I'm sure and I guess John Charles Dalton has take on Norman. He has given me so much of information. I'm sure as an American, you have the take on Norman.
Well, I support him. I think his information is depressing, but I think it's spot on. The question, it's really the issue for me is always the personal impact, the personal effect of the shutdown on ordinary people and on government employees, their salaries. I phrased it like this before, but the Republicans are depending on cuts in Medicare, Medicaid, food, SNAP, and other social service programs, including services for veterans. They're counting on that money in the budget to fund the gap that's created by the huge tax cuts they're giving to billionaires. So this is the exchange that the Republicans are demanding poor people get nothing, the rich people get the tax benefit. That exchange is simply baked into the big beautiful bill in such a way that Republicans to get out of that are going to have to not fulfill their promises to give the plutocrats and all the rich people the tax cuts that they are depending on. And so I think that's going to be front and center. I mean, I think we settle all the administrative details, but the social consequences of a policy which intentionally, cruelly affects so many people is going to come up again in the midterm elections.
Very well done. I'm very sure that still Zahran Mamdani's wins as mayoral race is still in the top list of the world's news trending. I want to begin with our international affairs commentator. He's the first international affairs commentator from Bangladesh. Sir, Mamdani has been elected mayor of the New York City from 2026. My question would be, he has already announced all female transition team, including high profile figures like Lina Khan, who was former FTC chair, signaling an ambitious and reformed oriented agenda. I framed a question for you because when Mamdani started his campaign, you were in the New York City to cover the UNGA. Question is, given Mamdani's identity, like he is a Muslim, he is young, he is a democratic socialist, he is an immigrant, he has born in Kampala, Uganda, he has Indian background, and all the female transition team he announced, what are the biggest opportunities and obstacles he faces in governing a city like, mega city like New York?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Kanchan. I realize that it is a question that our viewers have a huge amount of curiosity to understand. I was doing the program last week, and what I had understood, in my humble opinion, it was the 34-year-old socialist democrat or democratic socialist, which way you call it, he has now a very short time frame in order to keep the promises that had bolstered his election campaign. And of course, it's now Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani. So he is set to take the oath of his office from January 1st as the Mayor of New York. At this moment, he must understand where he stands, because his initial campaign was to raise the corporate tax for the very rich who have high incomes in New York City, to understand and make sure that societal welfare is being done with that increase. So once again, you must look at how Wall Street is going to handle this new mayor, whether Wall Street is going to accept him as mayor. We understand that the governor of New York, I do not recall the name, she has opposed views with Zohran Mamdani in regards to increasing this corporate tax. And of course, New York City is one of the greatest cities on this planet, not just in the United States. It is made out of almost 40% of immigrant populations. And if you look at the voter count on last week's election, almost over 1 million people had voted Zohran Mamdani into this mayoral seat. Of course, he has an opportunity to show his fellow followers that he has kept his promise. But that time frame is very short in a city like New York City. So once again, I would say that he has limited time, but everyone seems to be supportive of Mr. Mamdani.
Right, sir. Let me get a response from Norman from Washington. Then I will have a tough question for Sir Dalton because some critics are saying Mamdani is a sensation for the Americans, immigrants. Mamdani is a sensation for the young people. Mamdani is a sensation for the struggling people. I just framed a question for Norman. The question is, with increasing number of Americans saying religion is gaining influence in public life, how should secular governance respond? Should there be stricter separation of church and state, or more accommodation of faith in public policy? Because his fight is not with the left versus right, his fight is with billionaires. Mr. Norman.
Thank you for that very pointed question. Religion traditionally in the United States, actually in the Constitution, religion and state business uh, should be separate. That is the goal. But we know we deal with people. People are humans, and humans have their background. It's impossible not to overlook the impact of it. It will guide their decisions, but the overall point is that the government needs to be run, and they represent, these officials represent the people, all people, not just their religious sect, not just their background, not just their neighborhood. They represent everyone. So they have to come out of their self and become more of a dynamic force for the overall benefit of the people.
All right, Norman, as I said that I will do a tough question to John Charles Dalton because he has the experience worldwide on governance. My question would be, how much do levels like democratic socialist or Christian socialist matter in politics today in USA or in Western world, and are they helpful signposts for voters, and do they oversimplify complex policy stances and governing realities?
Big question. You meant Christian nationalists, not Christian socialists, but Christian nationalists, democratic socialists. When you label somebody, you bring a whole lot of baggage from the past and assign it to that person. And it's unfortunate, but it is the way that the media is very quickly able to make a story about an individual that sort of fits into that kind of profile. Mamdani is a very interesting character, and I think it's important for people to understand. He is not the first socialist mayor of New York. He's the first Muslim mayor for sure, but one of the greatest mayors in the history of New York, Fiorello LaGuardia, was a socialist. David Dinkins was a socialist. And so many of the housing programs and the transportation programs, public parks, public schools are in New York today because of Fiorello LaGuardia. So one should not be afraid of his socialist background so much. Maybe the rich are a little bit worried about his tax, and Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, probably has a similar feeling that, no, this is the money, we don't want to drive business out because they're very important for our overall income. But I think that that's misplaced. I think that a lot of the billionaires in New York, including my old friend Mike Bloomberg, would be happy to pay a social tax. He does great work on his own. He has a great philanthropy. He's a great philanthropist. And so I think that when the initial heat is off, many people in New York City are not going to be frightened away from having to pay a little bit extra. The question is, why is it such a bugaboo? And it's because Mamdani is a Muslim. And they're already labeling this as he's going to introduce Sharia law. They're already saying that this is the beginning of the influx. Today I saw the Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville, who is without doubt one of the most ignorant people in the United States, criticizing and indicating that the Muslim invasion is going to come. Mamdani is leading it from New York. Trump calls him a communist, although communists and socialists have little in common. So I think it's very, very unfortunate that people are labeled. That was the core of your question. It's very unfortunate that people are labeled. I will say one last thing about that. I'm old enough to remember when John F. Kennedy was called a terrorist because he would have a direct line to the Pope on account of he was a Catholic. And many people opposed Kennedy solely on the basis that he was a Catholic. And that kind of labeling of people because of their religion is un-American. And I hope that people, my colleagues and people of my generation, as I'm sure Gen Z doesn't care one way or the other, but I hope that people get over that whole business about the fear tactics of somebody based on their religion. He's a good man, he has a good education. Let's give him a chance and see what he can do in New York. He's following a really solid tradition of socialism as it applies in a democracy in the United States.
Right, sir. Let us get the field experience from Shamsul Alam Panto, our international affairs commentator. He was there in New York City in person to cover the UNGA, and he has seen the campaign of Mamdani. Sir, some people are saying that Mamdani's vision would be tough to execute because he has a fight with President Donald Trump himself, who threatened him in social media that he is going to cut off his budget. He has a fight with the billionaires in New York. He has a fight with the white people of this city because he is a Muslim, he is an immigrant, and he is young. Do you think he will be a short time sensation, or he will have to face really tough time managing economy and the promises he has given to the New York people?
Well, first off, I would like to mention that Donald Trump and Zohran Mamdani had shared retaliatory comments between one another, in which Donald Trump had said he would restrict federal funding for the city of New York. Now, that does make sure that New York suffers in the long run. But one of those examples I can give you from earlier today, we see Cornell University had made sure of a $60 million deal with the Trump administration in order to remove the blockade it had on the funding. It's one of those Ivy League institutions based out of New York. So the movement has started. Last week it was a very important week for US politics, in my opinion. We see the gubernatorial elections for Virginia as well as New Jersey, and they also had Democratic wins as far as I know. And of course, at this moment is just to see how New York and Washington can battle it out. I mean, Donald Trump is set to host foreign leaders as well later this month. But internally in America, if you would see it, New York City is a diverse, globalized city. There's no way that you can remove all of these immigrants. And of course, as Zohran Mamdani historically had said, it is made by immigrants, worked by immigrants, and now led by an immigrant. So that is a huge political success for those who are aspiring to live it big in New York City.
So let me do the last question to Norman regarding Mamdani issue, because Mamdani issue is still leading the world news trending. Norman, sir, I just want to know that why does the term socialism seem to be gaining appeal, especially to the young voters, as Sir Dalton says that Gen Zs, even as its meaning remains contested, and what are the implications if many people support policies they call socialist but don't agree on what that means, Norman?
Yes, to put it simple for New York City, one word, New York City is a city of millionaires. There are millionaires there. There's a lot of them, and they do not want that status quo upset. Even uttering the word of socialism creates fear, meaning they will have to lose something they thought or think they deserve. So the issues are more internal in New York because this city, this great city of New York, is a haven for the affluent. The people from other countries are coming there. They come there and they use New York as a base operations to move throughout the United States. And we have internal issues that's going to affect. Last week, the announcement of the election of the new mayor prompted the commissioner for the fire department, to resign. He resigned because he's a Jewish of Jewish descent, and he did not want anything to do with working for a Muslim. So these type of things have to be addressed. There will have to be a transition. There will have to be what we call come to Jesus meeting, and talk about exactly how this administration is going to be ran for all people, not just the Muslim, not just the Jewish, not just whoever. It's for all people.
All
But
right,
the
Norman.
issue is, it's still a city of millionaires.
Yes, all right, Norman, but his campaign very much appreciated by the medias, because he has opened so many dimensions in campaigning a political electoral business like this. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go for a short commercial break. When we'll be coming back, we'll have huge discussions on Russia-Ukraine attack and retaliation. On the other side, top generals are under attack from Israel for arrest warrant.
সারা দেশে লাখো মানুষের কঠোর কর্মতৎপরতা ও নিষ্ঠায় এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস এখন 16 কোটি মানুষের হাতের নাগালে। দীর্ঘ 30 বছর ধরে বিশ্বস্ততা ও দ্রুততার সাথে সেবা দেওয়ায় গ্রাহক সেবায় এখন শীর্ষে। বাংলাদেশে গ্রাহক সেবার সাফল্যের পর এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস এখন বিশ্ব বাণিজ্য কেন্দ্র সিঙ্গাপুরে। আপনার যে কোনো পণ্য সিঙ্গাপুর থেকে বাংলাদেশে বুকিংয়ের জন্য যোগাযোগ করুন। এসএ পরিবহন প্রাইভেট লিমিটেড, লজিস্টিক্স পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস, 22 রবার্টস লেন, সিঙ্গাপুর 218302। ফোন 0065 629 24900। বাংলাদেশ থেকে সিঙ্গাপুরে পণ্য বুকিংয়ের জন্য যোগাযোগ করুন ঢাকা সহ দেশের যে কোনো 80টি শাখা কেন্দ্রে। এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস, আপনার সেবা সব সময়।
Welcome, Grand Palace Hotel, Dhaka. A majestic lobby blending timeless elegance with modern design. Experience 5-star comfort in suites and rooms. Sophisticated fine dining restaurant. Crystal clear swimming pool for ultimate relaxation. Modern gym and serene spa for well-being. Perfect venue for corporate events, weddings and parties. Seamless and secured. Elegant and eye-catching design. Indulge, relax, discover the first 5-star chain.
Russia launched a good number of drones and missiles attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, killing several and disrupting services. My first question would be to Norman from Washington. Sir, how significant are these strikes in the broader context of the Russia-Ukraine conflict in terms of infrastructure versus military targets?
Thank you for this question. And how I'm going to explain this is basically this: nature. Winter is coming. The Russians administration is going to utilize Mother Nature against Ukraine, mainly the energy and infrastructure facilities. Instead of focusing on military targets, the new target is the infrastructure, the schools, the hospitals, the water sources, the energy sources. So this is going to create an economic and a psychological impact on the people living in this region through the winter period of time. So the goal is to break down the psychological resistance, also causing hardships. So the goal of this situation is this will undermine and have impact on how the people sustain daily life and how the existing government functions.
All right, I will have two back-to-back questions to John Charles Dalton. I know you will give us the right direction on these two questions. One is, could targeting civilian infrastructure be argued as a war crime, or what legal mechanisms might apply? This is one question, and other question is, how might Ukraine alter its defense or resilience strategy in light of this kind of attack from Russia or Vladimir Putin's generals?
Yeah. Let me take the second part first, if you don't mind. You know, we in the West support and defend Ukraine. We see things through Ukrainian eyes, Western eyes, NATO's eyes. And when we see that Russia is taking these aggressive actions against energy facilities and the like, we're of course concerned. But this is war. And Ukraine has also begun their attack on the energy facilities and the gas depots and other targets inside Russia. So while we have deep sympathy, I think in terms of looking at the whole situation, it is lose-lose. There's no way either side is going to be able to move this carefully. When you're in a war, it's very difficult to isolate crimes against humanity. If you attack civilian targets aggressively, as Israel did in Gaza, then of course it gives rise to the concern that this was an intentional effort to punish the people as opposed to punishing infrastructure and so forth. So when you target individuals and target people and children in hospitals and the like, you can be accused of indiscriminate crimes against humanity. Whether this rises to that level or not, I don't know, but the International Criminal Court, in response to a complaint by a member country, could very well find Putin to be involved in this crime against humanity. But that's why it's very, very important for people to sort of try to arrive at some negotiated settlement, because neither party seems willing to concede that that this is just mutually assured destruction using the weapons that they have available to them. And God forbid they should go to nuclear, but Norman has a point, of course, and this goes back to, as he pointed out last week, I mean, freezing the enemy has been sort of a traditional population in Europe, whether it's Stalingrad or whether Napoleon has used it. It's a common defense now, and winter is coming, harsh winters in Europe. So I think it's time for both parties to somehow be brought together as much as possible. If Trump can do it, fine. But I mean, it's a pity to watch all of these young people die over the egos of two people who simply will not back off and try to find some settlement.
Sir, in one line, if I ask you a question, is this a war between Vladimir Putin versus Volodymyr Zelensky, or it is a war between America versus Vladimir Putin? In one line, sir.
One line is no. I think Americans are sympathetic to the Ukrainian cause, but I don't think that America is against Putin or Russia per se.
All right, sir. I need to connect Bangladesh because besides journalism, besides international affairs commentary, you run enterprises and you run one of the largest transportation network in the country. So you have linked with the energy prices. My question would be, what implications do these attacks have for energy markets in Europe or globally or in South Asia? In particular spot is Bangladesh, because you are one of the sufferers, especially supply, pricing, dependency and availability.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kanchan. That's a very broad topic to comment, especially given that the Russian side and the Ukrainian side are still at it even after 3.5 years. But a recent news that I want to bring out to our viewers as well as our panelists here is that all these nations, including Russia, is testing a mechanism of delivering a nuclear torpedo. So this is a mechanism that they're testing. I wonder when they will be using such a mechanism. And not only so, United States is also testing its own capacities, nuclear capacities, and it's not just US and Russia. Other countries such as Pakistan has also decided they will also test their mechanisms. So more or less the entire world is understanding that this war may be spiraling out of control. And not only so, you wanted to know the Bangladeshi aspect. Several those who are seeking jobs abroad in unconventional methods have found themselves fighting for the Russian side on this war. Some Bengalis, they've been reporting how they've been living at the front lines of this war. But I want to give our viewers the news. On November 7th and 8th, Russia had launched over 500 drones and missiles into Ukraine, and their entire campaign was to damage Ukrainian energy infrastructure ahead of winter. As Norman was saying, this is another type of war tactic. They will freeze their enemy. But you want to look at energy markets. You want to understand where Europe as a whole is standing. We know that without the heating systems, it is quite impossible to live in almost a negative 10 to 20 degrees temperatures. So given that situation will last for 4 months, this winter in that region of the world will last for 4 months before we can find any other seasonal changes. But one thing it does hamper is worldwide energy markets will still be at a haste. That's the first. And of course, with the testing of such mechanisms, delivery mechanisms of nuclear warheads, it is a time to understand whether or not we need such devastation in the coming days.
Very smart response. I really appreciate. I need to get the last impression from Norman Flood Barnes from Washington, because at the end we all talk about the humanitarian crisis, humanitarian lifestyle. Sir, what are the humanitarian ripple effects within Ukraine? Power, heating, hospitals, and how should the international community respond? I will get the same response from Sir Dalton as well. Norman first.
Yes, this is a very interesting situation. First thing, geopolitically, we have to notice that Ukraine is located in Europe, is in Europe. Winter is coming. So what affects Ukraine also has a resounding effects on Europe. Right now we have a crisis within a crisis because of the situation with Ukraine, energy being cut off, and Ukraine serves as a transit hub for natural gas and other energies for Europe. By Ukraine not having that ability, it puts stress on Europe. Europe is still dealing with winter just like Ukraine, and the prices of fuel, gas, and natural gas and energy is going to rise, which is going to cause a real problem for the people of Europe and also their ability to assist Ukraine in their energy needs.
Sir, I wanted to have your comment on that, because at the end we all need the development of human life.
Yeah, well, I think that anytime that there's a war, I think that, we've looked at the war in Israel and Gaza as probably the most catastrophic humanitarian crisis of this past decade, maybe this century. And if we keep seeing the situation, as Norman has pointed out, the advance of winter in Europe, and whether the gas pipelines, which have fuel gone through Europe in the past, now go through Germany somewhat, that if we cannot find a solution to those energy situations for schools and hospitals and individuals, I think there'll be a crisis that will sort of so deeply affect the psyche of Europeans that they may never be able to sort of see Russia in the same way. And this division will cause knock-on effects in terms of so many other areas, in terms of scientific discovery, in terms of what happens with the nuclear Poseidon torpedo or other weaponry. I mean, Russia will become more and more isolated within the European context. And I think that will be very unfortunate, because sooner or later Mr. Putin will no longer be with us, but Russia will be there forever.
All right, sir, as Norman has the time limitation, I want to take his last take on one thing, that Gaza is the Gaza of Middle East. Norman, some commentators are putting their fingers that Ukraine is going to be the Gaza of Europe. What is your comment on that?
Wow, that is a very provocative point. Ukraine is going to be I don't know how to respond to that. Ukraine has its own certain situations, and Gaza, Israel, the West Bank also have their own situation. Basically war is hell. It's a lot of suffering. We're seeing a lot of people being persecuted, being punished for just being in these areas. Both of these situations is occurring both in the Palestinian area, the Gaza area, and also in Ukraine. So I it's very hard for me to decide, if this is the same thing. Both of these situations has their own unique circumstances, but at the end, it's a very destructive thing psychologically, physically for people in these areas. So I don't know how either these areas are going to recover in the near future, but its devastation is coming our way.
Norman, thank you very much. Wish you a very good holiday because today is Sunday in Washington. And thank you very, very much for your insightful and very thought-provoking contents you have provided to our show today. Have a great day. I want to come back to the studio with COP30 climate summit, sir, because it is very important at this moment. Vulnerable countries' testimonies will be projected over there. I want to begin with Shamsulam Pantho. He is following this event and he personally talked with me that he has great interest on climate summit. At this climate summit held in Brazil, officials from the world's most climate vulnerable countries, even Bangladesh, gave vivid accounts of damage and called for more action and funding. Sir, I want to begin with you. How well are major emitters responding to the calls made by vulnerable nations for increased support and finance? I am talking especially, I want to get your impression on Bangladesh because Bangladesh is truly devastated situation facing, especially in the coastal belt areas.
Thank you, Mr. Kanchan, for changing the topic into climate change. And of course, you have mentioned the COP30 that is on its way, underway in Belém, Brazil. Of course, I want to bring to everyone's attention that the Philippines has been battered by two different typhoons as of recent, one that has gone by earlier last week and one that is still approaching today. So it is fair to say that the November hurricane season has affected the Philippines and Vietnam in a uncommon pattern this time around. And not only so, we see how Jamaica had been destroyed by Hurricane Melissa. So once again, we must understand the implications of these damage ranges, how first world nations obviously have a responsibility in order to protect and conserve those who can't conserve it themselves. In addition to this, I would also like to mention that Bangladesh being one of those countries that face soil erosion. So every year we have coastal belt areas losing land.
Yes.
And according to various university studies, they have predicted that most of the southern belt that we have in Bangladesh over the next 100 years is set to be inundated by water. So that has a huge implication for a country of 200 million people. Once again, that in COP30, we must understand what are the major takeaways and, of course, what kind of policy making changes we will have in order to benefit climate change in a whole.
So, you are concerned about the Bangladesh's take on this COP30. I want to get the impression from a person who has born in a developed country, and it is this country itself under claim of producing carbon. I am talking about United States, sir. What new mechanisms or funding vehicles were proposed at COP30 to address loss and damage, and are they adequate?
For that specific question, probably not adequate. I mean, given the damage which has already been done. I mean, just the amount of damage that was done by Hurricane Melissa, as well as the typhoon which recently hit the Philippines. And if there's anybody in the Philippines, you know that my heart goes out to you. So that's it. Don't forget, this is COP30. That means that for 30 consecutive years, people have gathered and been wringing their hands about the effect of CO2 on the environment and the effect of greenhouse gases on the weather. And up to now, as you pointed out, the major emitters, which is the United States, and it's going back to pre-Obama, pre-Biden year policies, to drill. The oil companies put up a huge amount of money to put Donald Trump in office, and he's repaying them by increasing fossil fuels and the use of fossil fuels. We're also saying that China is increasing the number of coal plants that are being constructed, and they will continue to use coal as a way to advance their overall economic development. That's a major source of pollution. So there is not really anything like a global consensus about what's going to be done about the use of carbon fuels, fossil fuels, to control the weather, control the climate. And so I don't hold up much hope for COP30 as I didn't for COP29, as I didn't for COP28. There'll be a lot of discussion, a lot of fear raised. People will legitimately be talking. And we're seeing the effect in the southern Bangladesh. We're seeing the effect throughout Asia. And it's just simply, unless there is some sort of a dynamic new policy direction about controlling fossil fuels, it is simply going to be the same thing for COP31. That has to be the aggressive policy of the United Nations, of others. Now, one of the mechanisms that I just want to talk about is the whole climate finance emphasis, which is going on in helping countries address some of the climate problems. And climate finance, if it can increase to the level it needs to, can in fact have a very, very positive impact on mitigation of climate impacts in countries that are suffering like Bangladesh. And I hope that the climate finance continues to grow. It's funded by philanthropy as well as by other governments. That would be one of the things that would deal with the problem. But the source of the problem, the cause of the problem, is still largely being unaddressed.
All right, when I'll be back, I'll have a tough question to Shamsulalam Pantho, our international affairs. I'm giving the clue. How much does political will matter versus technical and financial capacity when it comes to climate adaptation and resilience? We will be seeking the interest of Bangladesh.
Bangladesh. Grand Palace Hotel Dhaka, 22 Kakrail, Dhaka, Bangladesh.
Welcome to Grand Club at Mirpur 10 Dhaka. Elegant spa and wellness facility for ladies and gents. Play pool and snooker in international standard billiard zone. World-class gym facility with exclusive equipment for man and woman. A restaurant of delicious local and international cuisine. Fully air-conditioned building with spacious banquet, car lift, sky view rooftop restaurant, all in one. Grand Club Limited, Mirpur 10, Dhaka.
কি এমন জিনিস যেটা সব লোকে খায়, ছোটরা খেলে পরে কেঁদে মায়ের কাছে যায়, বৃদ্ধ লোক খেলে পরে মাথায় দেয় হাত, যুবক যুবতীরা খেলে পরে এদিক ওদিক তাকায়?
ছেড়ে দে শয়তান, ছেড়ে দে, দেহ পেলে আমার মন পাবি না, ছেড়ে দে।
কোন ফলের বীজ নেই বলো দেখি দাদা, বলতে না পারলে হবে তুমি গাধা।
মন্দিরা চক্রবর্তী কার সাথে প্রেম করছে?
আমি এখন মা হতে চলেছে। চিনেছি তোমার।
As I said, I will continuously pressure our honorable commentator, guest, panelist and journalist to look the interest of Bangladesh. Sir, I said that how much does political will matters versus technical and financial capacity when it comes to climate adaptation and resilience. And of course, my question will be from Bangladesh side.
Of course, it's often overlooked. People do not try to recognize, if not, politicians do not try to recognize the effects of climate change. You have US President Donald Trump, who does not believe in climate change at all. This is just perspective. Whereas if you can look back to US Vice President Al Gore, back in 2006, he had released a popular film, The Inconvenient Truth. So this documentary showed how the carbon levels would be rising almost every year, and there is no way out. Humanity is facing a crisis that it does not understand or it cannot observe. To a certain degree, I would talk about Bangladesh today. There has been a cyclone in the Bay of Bengal, but because of Almighty's grace, it had not made landfall towards Bangladesh or towards the Sundarbans like it usually does. It had landfalled in Andhra Pradesh in India. So that's as far as this year. But sharing of the data that you have from observing weather patterns is something that should be beyond politics, beyond the hatred for one another. Recent times between our neighbors, we are not faring ground like we used to. Of course, there is political implications regarding that. But one must understand that in the face of natural calamity, it does not realize religion, it does not realize any territory, it does not realize the loss of life or the loss of infrastructure, such as we've seen in Jamaica. Hence, we should understand with our neighborhood on sharing of such data to avoid the numerous deaths that follow because of climate change.
Right, sir. I just want to conclude it here with the last question to John Charles Dalton. Sir, what role should developing countries like Bangladesh play in shaping their own climate agendas versus relying on international aids?
Well, every country has its own, environmental policy, and Bangladesh has its own policy as well. Don't forget, it's very, very difficult to manage Bangladesh as a unified country from the center. So much of what happens in Borishal and in southern parts of the country, Teknaf and other areas in the south, even Khulna, but along the coast, we know that in 1978 what happened is that there is simply an inability for a centralized government of this size of 200 million to properly manage such a decentralized population and put in place controls on construction of housing close to the river or close to the shore, development of industries close to the water, the use of energy, the use of gas. All of these things cannot be controlled by a centralized government. Bangladesh is the 7th most populous country in the world. 7 of the 10 largest countries in the world are federal republics. Bangladesh is one of the few countries that is a unitary state. Everything flows out of Dhaka. It cannot possibly have an implementable policy to control climate change from people sitting in Dhaka. And there's inability, lack of decentralization, lack of empowerment, lack of awareness by many of the citizens. So if you want to change things dramatically, there needs to be more decentralized authority, decentralized funds available so that people at the base level can take action.
That's really a very good proposal. I think very important to follow by Bangladesh government, so the rulers will come. Sir, as I said in the opening of the show, that arrest warrant for top Israeli official over Gaza actions. News says Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Prime Minister is reportedly subject to an arrest warrant issued by Turkey over alleged war crimes in Gaza. First, I want to draw the attention of our international affairs commentator, because he has huge interest and follow-up from Israel-Gaza issue. Sir, what is the legal basis and potential international impact of one country like Turkey issuing an arrest warrant for another country's head of the government?
Well, of course, it took to storm on social media as well as international media. But Turkey is one of those nations who, under the Abraham Accords, wanted a normalization with Israel. But this was before the heinous genocide that Israeli administration had continued. And of course, the Chief Public Prosecutor's Office in Istanbul had issued warrants against 37 people of the Israeli administration. This is, of course, following the reason that there is a ceasefire now, but the atrocities keep on continuing. And it's only Turkey that had taken such a vast step. We don't see Qatar and Egypt taking similar steps, but we understand that Turkey and Israel is coming to a point of direct confrontation regarding especially this news.
Sir, Shamsuddin Panto has given a clue that a direct confrontation may be witnessed by the world's people between Israel and Turkey. Both the countries are very strong according to the military mighty. My question is, how might this development, arrest warrant by Turkey, affect diplomatic relationship between Israel and Turkey and the broader Middle East countries? Do you believe other Middle East countries will go with Turkey, or will be silent, or will go with Israel?
Well, silence is golden, isn't it? I think that most people would follow their self-interest and their national interest and keep quiet. There's got to be more of this story. You know, Turkey is a bit of a loose cannon. They have interest, and they're the ones who said that they did not want Netanyahu to come to the conference in Sharm el-Sheikh to talk about the post-war Gaza situation. And so while there had been in the past some nice relations between Turkey and Israel, those have gone away. And there's got to be something behind the scenes about this. The International Criminal Court, if it's asked to issue a warrant for the arrest, this is Turkey itself and not the ICC. If the ICC were to issue a warrant like this, and I believe they have in some respect, that, but nobody respects that. And it's unfortunate, because I was living in Serbia, and just after that when Slobodan Milosevic, who was involved in the Srebrenica massacres, was brought to the International Criminal Court. And when Rodrigo Duterte was brought to the International Criminal Court for criminal activities. So, I mean, I hope if anybody in Turkey is watching, if you'll give me the power to issue the warrant and follow up on it, I'd be more than happy to do it, actually. It would delight me to find some way to put Benjamin Netanyahu behind bars.
Sir, last question, but I need the answer within 40 seconds. Could this escalate tensions or complicate peace negotiations in the whole Middle East region?
For sure. For sure it could. I think it's not an Arab question. Don't forget, Turkey's, not an Arab country per se. So I think that, as you point out, Qatar, Egypt, other countries like that, Arabic-speaking countries, they're looking to settle their own differences with Israel.
Yes, sir.
Turkey has a specific historic problem, and that's going to be solved in a different way.
Yes, sir. We are running really out of time, but I need to get one important question from Shamsuddin Panto, our international affairs commentator. What precedent does this set for accountability in war zones and conflicts involving non-state actors and state actors?
As Mr. Dalton was saying, of course, Turkey is not entirely Arabic, one of those Arabic nations. And of course, it sets a dangerous time ahead of whatever that is happening. But that should be all for today. I would want to pass it back to you to finish.
Thank you, sir. Newsroom is preparing for more updates, more developments on international issues. We'll see you tomorrow with new guest, with new panelists, new updates.